Welcome back to All This Math. This is Professor Parker, and make sure you're subscribed to the All This Math YouTube channel. Make sure you drop a comment down below. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you share the video with somebody. All right. Also, make sure you have a copy of How to Use All This Math Volume 1, which is available on Amazon. A book you can use to help prepare your children for math class before they even get there. All right. What's today's topic? Today's topic is case money. You know how I always like to make math as relevant as possible. I like to show you the relevancy of math because people always, whether you're a student right now or you was a student back in the day, and you probably asked that question, when I'm going to use this stuff? Why I need to know this, right? So there are people that have had experiences with lawsuits, right? I mean, we see all these billboards all over the place. So a lot of people must be getting cases, right? Must be catching cases, whether it's car accidents, whether it's slip and fall accidents. Maybe they be scamming. Maybe they don't be scamming. Maybe these are legitimate accidents. Who knows? What I want to talk about is using this as a way to get us to better understand percentages. Because as I also say, mathematics is a language, right? It's a language in and of itself. But within that language, you got like sub dialects. You got dialects of the language. Like you got fractions. Fractions is a language within mathematics. Percentages is a language within mathematics. Decimals is a language within mathematics. And you got other dialects too, right? Other different topics that we should be well versed in, right? So to the best of our ability, we should be well versed in percentages. So we're going to use this to talk about percentages and how to calculate percentages, how to not only understand the concept of a percentage, but how to calculate percentages. So dig this, right? I don't know if all law firms do this, but when there's a case, some law firms, when you hire them, when you take them on, right, as your law firm of record, they let you know up front, we're gonna take 40% off the top, right? So if you get a settlement and you win, we're gonna get 40% off the top. All right. So the question that we're going to talk about today in this video is how much is left. All right. And how do we calculate that? So we're going to go over three different examples. So let's say you get awarded, let's say you win, right? You sue, you win, right? You do your, go to your doctor's visits, you go to your therapy, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Physical therapy, all that type of stuff. I'm going to do a couple examples. Let's say somebody wins and they win 25, they get awarded 25,000. You're not getting the whole 25,000, right? That's why you got to know how to do the math, right? Because even after this, even after the attorneys take their money off the top, you still got other fees. You got medical fees, they got to get paid, all that type of stuff. But anyway, we're going to do an example with $25,000. We're going to do an example with $15,000. We're going to do an example with a random $54,000. All right. I'm going to show you how much you're going to get, how much is left, I should say. Not how much you're going to get, but how much is left after the 40% is taken off. All right. So let's get into this. All right. So let's say you get awarded 25,000. All right, so let's say 25K. All right. So the question is, we can either calculate how much the attorneys get and then subtract that from this, or we could just figure out the percentage that you're going to get, right? And I like for us to be what we call mathematically flexible, meaning knowing how to do it in different ways, right? So let's say we just want to figure out, let's say we want to do it the more traditional way. We want to figure out what dollar amount the law firm is going to get. Because a lot of people, if they don't understand percentages, they might think, oh, well, the law firm is going to get $40. Because if you don't understand the concept of a percentage, you might say anything. You're liable to say anything. You might think 40% is equivalent to $40. Well, 40% could be $40 depending on what your total amount is or your big number. All right. 40%, one way to find 40% is like this, right? You can take out a calculator, type in this total amount, 25K, which is 25,000. Type that in your calculator, right? Hit the multiplication button, and then convert this percentage to a decimal. Now, how do you convert a percentage to a decimal? You forget about the percentage symbol. You treat this like a 40, like the number it is, and then you divide that by 100. When you divide that by 100, that's equivalent to moving this invisible decimal point, to the left two spaces. 40 divided by 100 is 0.40, or just 0.4. Right? 0.4 and 0.40 are the same value. All right? 0.4 and 0.40 are the same value. So basically, you could do 25,000 times 0.4. So I'm gonna put that in my calculator. All right. times 0.4. Not 0.04, just 0.4 or 0.4. And that equals $10,000. So 40% is $10,000. So they're taking that 10 grand off the top. All right. So that's going to be 25K minus 10K. And then you got to do some subtraction. You got to know how to subtract. 25 take away 10 is 15. So that leaves you with 15K. Now, don't get too excited. You might say 15K, that's a nice piece of change. It is. But in reality, and we're not going to get into this in this video, but in reality, some more people got to get paid, right? The doctors got to get paid. If you went and had MRIs done and all that type of stuff, those facilities got to get paid. Everybody's got to get paid, all right? That's what happens. That's why this is big business. That's why you see the billboards all over the place and on the buses and everywhere you go. You see them. You hear them on the radio, advertising, right? All them different, slip and fall. They call them ambulance chases, right? They advertise a lot because it's a lot of money to be made, right? They just want their percentages. All right, so that will leave 15K. Now, to be divided between you and everybody else that still got to get paid too. Now, another example. I told you we're going to do 3 examples. Another example, let's say you get awarded 15K or 15,000. Law firm gets 40% off the top. Go to your calculator. 15000. Multiply that by 40% represented as a percentage. 40% represented as a percentage is, again, still 0.4. So that's times 0.4. 6,000. So the attorney's going to get 6,000. Subtract that. You get 6K. Make sure you know how to subtract, right? Without a calculator. This is mental math. At least it should be. 15 minus 6. 15,000 minus 6,000. 15 minus 6 is 9. 15,000 minus 6,000 is 9,000. Right? So that's 9K. All right. Now, let's talk about another way to figure this out, what we just did. Now, if we know that the law firm is getting 40% and altogether our total is 100%, right? The amount that the law firm doesn't get versus the amount that the law firm does get. 40 plus what number equals 100? Because when we deal with percentages, the entire pie, since a percentage is basically another way to represent a fraction, right? The entire pie is 100. So the difference between 100, which is the whole thing, and 40 is 60%. So that means that the amount that the law firm is not going to get is 60%. They get 40, that means they're not getting 60. And that's what we're trying to figure out. How much would be left? 60% would be left. So another way to do these problems is you can just figure out what 60% is. So we could have just did, instead of having to figure out 40% and then subtract it from 15K, we could have just immediately figured out what 60% was, and that would have took us straight to 9K. I'll show you. Put 15,000 in your calculator. Watch what happens. 15,000 times 0.6. You get 9,000. See? This is 100%. This is 40%. 100% minus 40% equals 60%. See how that works? So we could have just figured out what 60% was from the rip, right? That's another way to do it. Let me also show you another way to do this. Let's say you don't have a calculator, right? So you lost your calculator. And the only calculator you got is on your phone. Let's say you're somewhere where you can't use your phone. If you go to a school, if you're a student looking at this, you go to a school where it's a cell phone. There's no cell phone policy. All right. So you got to figure out how to write this down. And you don't have no calculator available. So you got to figure out how to do this manually. You also can use mental math for this. If I want to figure out what 40% is, let's say I want to figure out what 40% is, and I'm going to do it the first way we did this, right? So I figure out what 40% is. I know I can figure out what 10% of any number is very easily. All right. 10% of any number. We can figure that out very easily. That's how we do this. We look at the original amount, 15,000. The way you figure out 10% of any number is you locate the decimal point in that number. Locate the decimal point in that number. And you simply move the decimal point one space to the left. One space to the left. So it's going to be like this. 15,000. Now I said locate the decimal point. Now somebody looking at this might say, well, Professor Parker, there's no decimal point there. What are you talking about? Right? Right. This is true. There's no decimal point written. But as a math student, it is your responsibility to know that there's an invisible decimal point right here at the after the last digit, after the last zero. There's an invisible decimal point right there. All right. That's what we got to know. There's an invisible decimal point right there. All right. So then what you do is you move that decimal point one space to the left. And then you read the number and see what it is. So now we got 15 with 2 zeros. How much money is that? How much money is 15 with 2 zeros? Right? That's $1,500. So 10% of 15,000 is 1,500. That's $1,500. All right. So now how does that help me though? If I know what 10% is, so this equals 10%. Then we got to think about, well, what's the relationship between 10% and 40%? 10% and 40%. 10% and 40%, the relationship is 10% is 1/4 of 40%. So if I'm going to figure out what 40% is, all I got to do is take what 10% is and multiply it by 4. Multiply it by 4. So because I could do 10% times 4 to get 40%, I'm going to do 15,000 times 4. No, not 15,000, 1,500. 1,500. The original number was 15,000. I could do 1,500 times 4 to get 40%. So what's 1,500 times 4? 1,500 times 4. Again, we need to know our multiplication facts, right? And you don't got to stop at your 12 facts. You can go up to the 13 facts and memorize those. The 14 facts, memorize those. The 15 facts and memorize those. If you got 15 facts memorized, you'd be in good shape right now. You won't have to rely so much on a calculator. You could know that 15 times 4 is 60. So therefore, 1,500 times 4 is 60 with two extra zeros attached to it. So what's 60 with 2 extra zeros? That's 6,000. 6K. That's another way to figure out 6K. So basically, as a quick recap, all you got to do is know how to figure out 10%, no matter what the number is. We could have did that up here. What's 10% of 25K? 2,500. 10% times 4 is 40%. What's 2,500 times 4? What's 2,500 times 4? 2,500 times 4 is 10,000. See how that works? So you could do this mentally. You don't even need a calculator really, as long as you have your multiplication facts memorized. You need to have the multiplication facts memorized. I stress that so much. I will always stress that. I will continue to stress that. It don't matter that, well, I can just use a calculator. What if you don't have a calculator? And also, here's another thing. Even if you do have a calculator, why do we always want to rely on technology so much? Why do we want to do that? Why does that make us comfortable? Right? Why do we want to just admit that computers are smarter than us and act like the computer is smarter than us? All that artificial intelligence and the machine learning, that came from scientists in the 1950s and the 1940s, 1960s, 70s, 80s, studying the human brain, right? And adapting methods of how the human brain processes information and applying that to computer development. So the artificial intelligence, remember, you're the natural intelligence. So act like it. All right. Don't be so overly reliant on computers and calculators all the time. They're good tools. They're good tools, but don't be so overly reliant on them. All right. So 1,500 times 4 would be 6,000. 15K minus 6K is still 9K. All right. Last example. A bigger amount. Let's say somebody gets awarded 54 racks. All right. So we got 54K. Now, how are we going to do this? We talked about 3 different ways to figure this out. All right. Let's use all 3. So first, let's do this. Let's say, now this one's a little more tricky because finding out 10% of 54,000 is 5,400. So let's say 10% is 5,400. I mean, that's not too crazy, but that's a little odd because it's, it don't end in all zeros. It's a 5 and then a 4 and then 2 zeros, right? Instead of being just 5,000, right? So 5,400. Now we want to find 40%. What's 5,400 times 4? 5,400 times 4. Let's do the math. Let's break it up. Now, this is why understanding place value is important, because you could break 5,400 up into 5,400, right? Now, this is one of the ways in which multiplication is being taught in contemporary times. So parents, don't complain when your children are learning it that way. All right. This meant to help them think more clearly about multiplication as a concept. So 5,400 can be broken up into 5,400. So if I do 5,000 times 4, that's 20,000. If I do 400 times 4, that's 1,600. So 20,000 plus 1,600. 20,000 plus 1,600. That's 21,600. So 40% is going to be 21,600, right? That's your 40%. That's the attorney fees, 21,600. All right. So to figure out how much you're left with, how much is left after the attorneys take theirs off the top, is 21,600. Right. So now you got to do some subtraction. 54,000 minus 21,600. How would I do that? This is how I would do this. Mentally, no calculator, I would do 54,000. I would break this up into 20,000 and 1,000 and 600. I would subtract piece by piece. I would do 54,000, take away 20,000 first. That's going to be 34,000. 54,000 take away 20,000 is going to be 34,000. Then from the 34,000, I'll take the 1,000. 34 minus 1 is 33. Then I got now I'm at 33,000. Then the 33,000 take away the 600 is going to be 32,400. 32,400. So that's how much you be left. That's a nice piece of change. But again, remember, the doctors still got to get paid, right? If you went and got an MRI, X-ray, CAT scan, all that type of stuff, they got to get paid. Went to see a psychologist, went to get some type of therapy. Everybody got to get paid, right? Everybody get their piece, right? So you're not gonna come home with that. Just like you wasn't coming home with that, you're not even coming home with this, right? So just keep this in mind. All right. What's another way to do this? I could have did in my calculator 54,000, and found 40% of it. So that's 0.4. 40% and 0.4 are equivalent, right? So again, yeah, 21,600, and then just subtract it from 54,000. Now in the calculator, you could just make 21,600 negative, hit the negative button, and then do addition. Because when you add a negative to a positive, that's the same thing as subtracting that negative number from the positive, but treating the negative like it's a positive though, but doing subtraction. Kind of like this. -2 plus 3 is the same thing as doing 3 minus 2, right? It's the same mathematical process. You're going to end up with the same result. I'm going to say it again. -2 plus 3 will give you the same result as doing 3 minus 2, switching the positions of the numbers, right? But the minus sign will stay with the 2. All right. So yeah, 32,400. Or what we could have did is the other way I showed you is this. If we know the law firm is getting 40%, that means it's going to be 60% left. It's going to be 60% left. So if it's 60% left, then that means that we could have just calculated what 60% of this is. All right. Or we could have did it, my way, with the 10% way, right? 5,400 times 6. That would have gave us this answer. 5,400 times 6. Now, what's 5,400 times 6? I'm still break the 5,400 up. I'm going to break it up into 5,400. So 5,000 times 6, that's 30,000. Because 5 times 6 is 30. Again, make sure you know your multiplication facts. If you don't know your multiplication facts, you're tripping. You need your multiplication facts. You need to know them. 5,000 times 6 is 30,000. 400 times 6 is 2,400. How do I know that? Because 4 times 6 is 24. So 400 times 6 is $2,400. So 30,000 plus 2,400 is $32,400. So you see, like, even if you about to get some case money, and if you don't mind having your children all in your business or whatever, this is an opportunity for you to help them practice some math skills. That's what this is. You can practice some math skills. All right. So, and again, the purpose of this was to get you more familiar with percentages. Percentages are a very important concept. Just in life, we hear about percentages all the time on the news, on social media, wherever we be at. People print it. We see it, all the time. Percentages, but you need to understand what a percentage really means, and also how to calculate percentages. That's of the utmost importance. All right, so make sure you subscribe to the All This Math YouTube channel. Like this video, drop a comment down below, share this video with somebody else, and make sure you grab a copy of How to Use All This Math Volume 1 available on Amazon. I'll see you all on the next video. Peace.